Hello there y'all, I'm Rain and welcome to Fennec Fables. Thanks for joining me here where we delve into some fun prompts for adding depth to your tabletop role-playing games, to give you some interesting ideas to think about as you play or prepare. I had a little bit of a computer hiccup, so instead of what I had planned for this week, I figured it may be fun to discuss traps in games. I'm hoping to get a new computer sometime in the future, so if you can, every little bit on the Etsy and Ko-Fi really helps. As for traps, whether you are looking for a simple pit trap all the way to something that would make Jigsaw look on in impressed awe, traps have a conflicted history in many games. Whether it's the overabundance of their use, the attempt to make them literal death traps, or possibly the annoyance on how little interaction with them that there can be. I'm hoping that I might be able to give some ideas on implementing them as well as some personal faves of mine that I've used in the past and have had good effect with. Hopefully if you all enjoy, you might subscribe to the channel for future content and share it around with your friends. Every new subscriber helps as I try to grow. I'll preface this all with just saying that this is my own opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. Often, many players or game masters don't like traps for any number of reasons, and that's entirely valid. Some things aren't fun for folks, but I'm hoping that engaging with them in a new way may bring some new angles for y'all to enjoy. Starting off, let's think about the purpose of a trap. When you're playing in or preparing for a game, it's important to consider traps not just as a setback, obstacle, or way to damage the group, but as its own part of the world as a whole. It isn't just something that springs into existence, it should be something that is there for a reason. What that reason may be can vary, and it may be something as simple as to guard something, to harm, to test or challenge someone, or quite possibly to capture or hinder. Most often, when people think of traps, the first thing that springs to mind is a pitfall. Something easily made and can serve multiple roles. The purpose generally being to obstruct and capture someone, like often seen in cartoons with great effect.
Hey, what happened?
Prepare for trouble, how have you been?
Make it double, thanks for dropping in.
When you're hoping to use a trap in a game, it's important to see what you are trying to achieve with it, both out of the game as a challenge for the players, but also in the narrative of the game itself. As an example, is this something that is being constructed and intended to be reused, such as a pitfall, falling cage, or a slamming gate? Or was this something constructed in haste that may only be able to go off once, in which case it may be intended to harm or hinder, such as darts, falling rocks, or some form of net? Something to consider is also if the space is occupied or not. If you do have traps in a space that is meant to be lived in or traversed often, consider how those that use the space navigate it. Is it a space that has a predetermined route for safety? Is there a secret path meant to bypass it all? Or is it, one of my personal preferences, a bypass switch or lever that is engaged to nullify or hold something for a time period? People that are going to be going to their vault, for example, wouldn't want to be taken out by their very traps that they laid to secure it after all, right? So when you're trying to implement a trap, try and think of it beyond just the danger it presents, but also in what it says about the space it occupies. For example, in my games, I've often had old traps that have been in long abandoned places co-opted by the new occupants, using the older mechanisms to change a place to now be a stronghold and utilize them for their own benefits. Kobolds taking over a long abandoned military outpost, taking advantage of that heavy gate, or the fact that their tiny bodies are not heavy enough to set off floor mechanisms, for example, would be really clever to get along with. I like setting traps aimed at heights that surpass their own, for example, which leads into utilization, I think. How one utilizes traps is just as important as the purpose. Where and what they do can make all the difference. Traps that are just purely, "Welp, you didn't declare you looked, so you take X amount of damage," and then carry on, I think, is at the heart of why many players and game masters tend to find them rather lackluster. I think it's important to have traps not only as a part of the space, but also the story of it. To borrow an idea from video games, oftentimes the first attack will miss from an enemy so that players may be alerted that there is danger about. This can also work similarly to TTRPGs, where as they explore a space, they may find remnants of past violence and misadventure. One of my personal go-tos is a trap that has sprung, either with a victim inside or possibly, depending on the age, broken and revealed some details, so that the players are aware that this is a possibility. This can be a floor trap that is broken and revealed that there are holes in the surrounding area, scorch marks from where gouts of flame have come out of cracks in the floor, and walls, or even the obvious darts impaled on a wall, giving narrative and visual clues for players to take in. I think one of the biggest follies really comes down to engaging with them. I don't know about y'all, but I've played in several games where someone will say, "I roll a check for traps," and I feel that really isn't the way to make them actually have any gravitas. If you reduce things to base pass-fail, then it really takes what makes them a challenge to face and breaks it down to a luck check. Instead of just saying, "Yup, you find 3 traps, here, here, and here," then they have nothing else to do with those things. Have them be able to inspect places for odd wear patterns, peculiarities in the furniture or layout, or maybe even them catching odd scents in the air, and have that weave into how things go. And maybe that leans into it somehow, how they bypass them or even use them to their advantage. If it's things set off by specific tiles, how do they avoid them? If it's based off of height, what do they do? I implore you to actually make things that have to be engaged with instead of waved aside. Give them more things to manipulate and contend with than simply cutting a wire and going about their day. If at all possible, also leave room for them to use these things for their own benefit later on. There's nothing quite like being able to turn a trap around on a foe. Getting into the thick of it and putting a foe into a position to fall into their own device is just delicious. But on that note, I think it might be fun to describe some fun traps that I've used in the past, and maybe have y'all comment your own fun devious devices down below. I try to put varying things up in my games, so I thought it would be interesting to describe 3 categories of traps I used in the past, being a natural occurrence, a physical trap, and a magical one. Often, when we think of traps, we talk about things set by people, but sometimes the trap in question is actually just nature taking its course and catching us unawares. This trap was actually something that was inspired by Indiana Jones, that being the brittle floor trap. This is also something that has come up in the anime Dr. Stone. The general premise is the players traveling underground via cave system, the Underdark, or what have you, and they enter an enclosed area where the floor itself is a lesser traveled path that, due to the makeup of it, will crumble in some sections. The players will have to find a way to traverse it safely. Some methods for bypassing it can be the obvious use of flight, but depending on the game system, you're going to have to be a little bit more clever with it. There are things like using the buddy system and rope to make it so if somebody does fall, they can be pulled back up, but this one can be a bit more risky. There's also attempting to test spaces with weapons or other forms of weight, or even getting clever with things like ladders to attempt to disperse your weight while you traverse it. The past few times I've had this sort of challenge come up, the players have used these type of solutions, but who knows, yours might have something else, and I find that makes it all the more engaging and difficult to go along with it. As for the mechanical trap, or should I say physical trap, one of my all-time faves is the loot bridge. This one can either be used as a damaging trap, or, as I prefer it, a cage. The general premise is that you have what appears to be a stone bridge going across some form of gap or chasm, with handrails on each side. Each time I've used it, there is a heavy prize on the other side, either gold, treasures, or anything really that entices the players. The bridge is actually in 3 parts, and if sufficient weight is put upon the middle segment, the pillar it rests upon actually slides down, having the other ends of the bridge lift up and enclose them in a cage, with the railings acting as bars. What's interesting with this is sometimes player may bypass it without even knowing it exists, again by properly spreading their weight across the other ends. And that makes it so that it doesn't have enough weight in the middle to slide down. If they do fall for this trap though, they will have to figure out how to escape. I can leave this up to you, but I find them having to give up on the rewards and push them out the bars to make it fall in the endless crevice below can lead to some interesting moral quandaries. There's also the magical or mundane method, such as destroying the stone bars and attempting to climb away, but that can also lead to their surprise as the bridge resets and as they're climbing up, and now they have to contend with the fact that the bridge is slamming back down with them hanging on the outside of it. Finally, I'll leave off with a magical trap that I've used before, which involved the players stumbling onto a den used by a dragon. This wise being actually did not wish to harm those that entered their realm, but she knew she needed to take precautions. Those that disturbed the treasures, either by grabbing onto them or by climbing over them, found that they began to rise slowly to the ceiling, which was smooth as a surface. This effect was not instantaneous, but it was perceivable in degrees depending on how far they proceeded into the room. If they made their way to the outer edge of the room, they actually would begin to float back down. It was funny because the last time I used this, one of the players kept trying to run to the edge with things they had in hand and were surprised that the loot they grabbed seemed to fall back into the pile instead of falling with them. And on repeated attempts, I began describing it as it literally raining coins. For this one, finding the source of what made the gravity change became the solution, but required careful traversal of them using their wits as they tried to find the disguised object hidden amongst everything else in this space. What about you guys though? Have you ever had an interesting moment with traps in your games? I'd love to hear about it down below. With that though, thank y'all so much for watching this video, and I really am looking forward to hearing your own fun creations or experiments that you've had with traps. If you've enjoyed this video, please if you can, leave a like, share, or especially a subscribe, which really helps as I work on getting more of these videos out. I've been working on my way to 500 subscribers, and each new one is a great joy to me. If you enjoy answering TTRPG prompts or questions, please join me on Twitter or Blue Sky, where I post daily, which is in the description down below and linked on the main channel page. Who knows? Your responses may be part of a future video. If you have any suggestions for future topics, I'm always interested in what folks would like to hear, and you can send them either by email or joining on the channel Discord, where you can chat with me and fellow cool people. Thanks again, y'all, and I hope that these ideas were useful to you and help you tell better tales. Enjoy this photo with my dog, and talk to you later. Bye.